Welcome to episode 7 of The Coin Pod, a weekly Bitcoin podcast featuring conversations with individuals all around the world who build, study, and use Bitcoin. I'm your host, Zach Voll. You might know that the team here at Yumi and BTC has a special place in our hearts for decentralized exchange projects. In the last Coin Pod, I chatted with Chris Beams, co-founder of the decentralized exchange Bisq. And if you missed that episode, you can find it and all the others by visiting thecoinpod.com. Today's episode is Decentralized Exchanges Part 2. I had the opportunity to catch up with Roman Snitko, Chief Technology Officer for the decentralized exchange HodlHodl. Roman offers an entirely new set of important thoughts on the security of exchanging Bitcoins, the challenges of centralized and decentralized exchanges alike, and the future of cryptocurrencies being traded on decentralized exchanges like his own. You won't want to miss his top-notch opinions, so without further delay, here's Roman. Roman, thanks so much for joining me today. It's really a pleasure having you on the show.
Sure. Great talking to you.
Before we jump into you and Bitcoin and decentralized exchanges, I do have one question. Can you advise me on the correct pronunciation of, I guess everyone pronounces it differently. Is it HodlHodl or HodlHodl? Those are the two most common pronunciations I've heard.
Yeah, we generally just leave it up to people, whatever is more convenient to them. It's like, with Dogecoin, I think people tend to pronounce it differently. Well, we just call it HodlHodl. That's because it's easier to pronounce it this way in my language, but whatever people prefer is fine with us.
Okay, perfect. Can you tell me a little bit about how you first got into Bitcoin and how you found yourself working on this decentralized exchange project within the Bitcoin space?
Right. So I think I first heard about it in 2011. Like half of the front page of Hacker News was about Bitcoin, and I looked into that. And I think it was about the time that Gavin Andresen was invited to the CIA to talk about Bitcoin, and I was like, oh, that must be interesting. And then I just forgot about it for a couple of years, right? And I was reintroduced to it in, I think, 2012 by a friend of mine, Oleg Andreev. He's kind of famous in the Bitcoin community, and a really great developer. And so he told me a lot about like economics and pointing my attention to great books on economics, and then I read them, and then he mentioned Bitcoin, and I was like, oh, right, that's a great implementation of the economic principles that we were talking about, like sound money, no government intervention into the monetary policy, and I thought Bitcoin must be something interesting, and so I started looking into it, started working on some of the projects. We went to the 2013 San Jose conference, and since then I was just working in the space.
And the idea of decentralized exchanges, all of these projects are, I would say more timely than ever now, but decentralized exchanges being compromised has been going on ever since centralized Bitcoin exchanges have existed. It sort of goes with the business of being a centralized service provider of any sort. But a majority of the newer Bitcoin community, and I say newer within the context of 2000, let's say 15, 16, 17 maybe, rely heavily on your Coinbases and Poloniex and Krakens but all of these exchanges. Can you briefly sell them on the idea of a decentralized exchange, not just from a security standpoint, but from just the whole package of of the advantages that a decentralized exchange offers?
Right. Well, because I know there's a category of people that would not be using decentralized exchanges, and I'm talking about day traders. I mean, it's completely against what they're doing, what they're trying to do. It doesn't suit their purposes. But and then also, I guess, people who want to buy a lot of Bitcoin and they have their money in their bank account, and let's say they have a lot of money, it's not always more convenient for them to use decentralized exchanges and they would be better off by using Coinbase or whatnot, especially like if they're in the US or Europe. But in many countries of the world, I think decentralized exchanges thrive. There doesn't have any kind of specific regulations or laws or stance regarding to Bitcoin, and it remains in the gray zone, and so people don't really know what to do. And I think Venezuela is actually kind of a great example of that. Other countries in Asia, in Eastern Europe, are also examples of that. So one really one really big great advantage regarding the security of decentralized exchanges is that they're not honeypots of money. I'm sorry, I actually said decentralized. Well, our exchanges, first of all, it's not decentralized; it's a peer-to-peer exchange. We still have a central server. But talking about honeypots, I think it's important to mention that because we require two keys to sign a release transaction, it means that even if the hacker gets access to our server somehow, he still wouldn't be able to release the money from the escrow address to his address. And that means there's very little incentive for him to try and hack the exchange. That's actually what differentiates us from, let's say, local Bitcoins, which is also a peer-to-peer exchange. But the problem with them is that they still store Bitcoins in their wallet, which can be hacked, and they only require one key to sign the transaction. Well, essentially, that's what it is. So I think this is really one of the biggest advantages that HodlHodl has right now in the space.
I see. And there is a huge laundry list of similar exchanges, many of whom brand themselves as sort of decentralized exchange service providers. Everything from Bisq to the 0x project. It's an enormous list, and they all more or less label themselves as decentralized, but there's a huge spectrum of decentralization. There's not necessarily a set definition of what decentralization means. Can you talk to me a little bit about why HodlHodl chose the peer-to-peer method of exchange service providing with still having a central server? So not 100% decentralized, I guess, but maybe we could say moderately decentralized.
Right. So I think we want it to be somewhere in the middle between Bisq, which is a decentralized exchange because they don't have a centralized server on which their software runs, right? And local Bitcoins, which is mostly centralized. And we want it to be somewhere in the middle. The user interface and the convenience of just going to a website and being able to trade Bitcoins, but at the same time providing more security. I think that was our goal. And we actually got a lot of people calling us decentralized, and then some other people saw those comments and they were pissed off because they rightly pointed out that, hey, HodlHodl is not actually decentralized. And so we are now very careful with how we label ourselves because, we piss off a lot of people by using the wrong words. And I actually understand the importance of using the right words. So guys, don't be too tough on us if somebody calls us decentralized, because we're not. We're peer-to-peer exchange.
I'm curious, though, if you foresee, given the needs we just discussed a minute ago of day traders to use centralized exchanges, do you foresee a point in the future where just your average user buying more Bitcoin, not necessarily trading it, but I guess an example right now would be someone who just discovered Bitcoin and is looking to buy their first Satoshis or something? Is there a point in the future that you foresee where peer-to-peer or more or less decentralized exchanges, decentralized mediums of exchange, can sort of achieve a flippening with these centralized exchanges? Do you foresee that as a real possibility?
Right. I think the answer is no. I think there will be many ways in which people can buy Bitcoins and other cryptocurrency. I think decentralized exchanges. I'm sorry, I'm using the same word again myself because it's so common. You call it decentralized. Okay, so peer-to-peer or decentralized exchanges, um, they will get more traction, I think, especially in certain countries of the world. For sure, that's going to happen. Um, but there always will be many different ways to purchase bitcoins. So the answer is yeah, maybe at some point in certain countries there will be they will have more use than traditional exchanges.
And HodlHodl, forgive me if I have this incorrect, but HodlHodl only supports Bitcoin. Is that correct, or do you all support a variety of different altcoins?
We also support Litecoin, and the reason for that is because Litecoin is technologically closer to Bitcoin than pretty much anything else, and it's a popular currency. So we decided, hey, why not just use Litecoin? Especially that at the time that we were developing HodlHodl, Litecoin was the first one to implement SegWit. And so we saw this opportunity, and also as sort of supporting the right kinds of players in the field, and so we decided let's also add Litecoin to the exchange. And we actually had a couple of trades already on the exchange that involved Litecoin. I think it's a great sign.
I'm sort of a soft Bitcoin maximalist, but I'm at the same time I'm not really interested in many other coins, even though I know a bunch of the newcomers to the cryptocurrency space in general are attracted by all these other coins. Does HodlHodl sort of see itself as the Bitcoin maximalists peer-to-peer exchange, so to speak? Even though I guess you've added support for Litecoin, but do you foresee yourself adding other coins in the future, or just sort of sticking with Bitcoin and then now Litecoin?
No, we don't plan on adding any other coins. I mean, we sort of explore that a little bit, but I don't think it's going to happen this year for sure. And the reason it's not just about being Bitcoin maximalist, which, I like the word that you use, soft maximalist. I guess that's what I would describe myself as well. But there's also a technological reason in that adding any other coin is just adding an angle of attack to the exchange. And it takes a lot of efforts, lots of resources, lots of money to implement something that's, let's say, very different from Bitcoin in terms of code, right? So we're just not ready to make those commitments.
I see. I saw some of your tweets the other day about testing the security of HodlHodl and everything else. Can you explain to me some of the key challenges that your team is facing right now or working on overcoming? Your Twitter bio says that you eat failure for breakfast. What sorts of problems are you chomping on right now? What sort of challenges is the team overcoming at the present moment?
Right. So I think challenge number one for any Bitcoin exchange is security. So you got to be really careful. You got to really uh, take care of proper security measures and constantly be thinking about them. Because if you're not thinking about them, if you're not constantly keeping them in your head, then you have a problem. So what we did, we had three separate teams of uh, security experts do a penetration testing on the exchange, and they all send us reports. We've identified a couple of them. It's a normal process. And we also are continuously going to be checking the website for to explore further problems and vulnerabilities that might appear when we add, let's say, new features or fix something. That's a normal process. So that's a challenge in itself, right? But then also when we were developing the exchange and when we launched the testnet version of it, we had a number of traders try and use it, and they came up with all sorts of suggestions and all sorts of improvements that we might want to consider implementing. And we realized that building a peer-to-peer exchange in a way is much more complicated in terms of business logic, in terms of workflow, than building a centralized exchange, because there are so many little things that you don't even think about when appear when people actually start trading. Like, how do you resolve disputes? What happens when one of the traders disagree with the other, and like, how do you resolve all that? And what happens after the dispute is resolved? How do you return the money and all of those things? And it's really very complicated, and we're still working on polishing that. I think it's very interesting, but it's challenging for sure.
Sure, sure. I guess one of the other challenges that maybe, or not maybe, but I know for sure that HodlHodl is not the only peer-to-peer slash decentralized exchange faces is liquidity and the volume of Bitcoin, or I guess in other exchanges, other coins being offered for buying and selling, or the amount of buy and sell orders listed. Can you talk to me a little bit about HodlHodl's strategy for increasing that liquidity, or is that maybe at this point a secondary or tertiary concern to ironing out the security of the exchange first and foremost?
Right. I think we intentionally started small, and we didn't make any kind of specific marketing effort, except that we do have a referral system, so people can sign up and get paid part of the commission that we earn from traders that they invited. But the reason we don't market ourselves aggressively right now is exactly because we want to iron out the security issues, like make sure everything works as intended. So we're kind of it's baby steps. I think it's very important for a critical service like a Bitcoin exchange. And in terms of liquidity, yeah, we're working on that. Just takes time. I think it's normal.
I can't find the link right now, but I know on GitHub somewhere, it may have been reposted also in a Medium blog post. The huge list I mentioned earlier of all of these exchanges that offer so-called decentralized or peer-to-peer services. Can you talk to me a little bit about your opinion from building one of these exchanges on these other projects that sort of range all across a pure decentralized exchange to having a token for exchanging different cryptocurrencies and tokens and all the sorts of things? Do you have any insights on the future of all of these different projects, as diverse and new as they all are?
Right. So while we were building HodlHodl, we were constantly looking out for competitors, or any kind of similar projects out there. And so we know what's going on in the community, right? I think there are a couple of very interesting and really technologically great projects, such as Bisq, and we highly respect local Bitcoins. They're personally my heroes. I think bootstrapping the business from zero, not taking any investors' money. That's actually what we are doing as well. So those guys are great, and then you see lots of different exchanges popping up in many different countries across the world, and you can see they're not really serious. Many of them are getting hacked precisely because they don't even think about security. It's not even on their radar. They just build a website and using some popular framework and launched it as soon as possible. That was their primary objective: to launch as soon as possible, get as many customers as they want, not thinking about the security, because they rightly understand that time plays against them, because there's so much competition on the market, so they need to launch fast. But it's not an excuse to not think about security, because eventually you end up losing people's money, and that's really not a great situation to be in.
Yeah, exactly. So Yumi and BTC, the website that produces this show and that is sort of a project that's been going on for a few years with me and my college roommate and one of his friends. Decentralized exchanges are something we both, or I guess all three of us, are very interested in and appreciate a lot. And between the three of us, HodlHodl and Bisq are two of our favorite projects. And even though there may never be a Coinbase, DEX, decentralized exchange, flipping, whichever exchange it may be, I sort of do look forward to the time when people are more significantly more accustomed to using a decentralized exchange for buying and selling Bitcoin and other coins if they like, rather than relying on these vulnerable centralized exchanges that have been hacked ever since TradeHill and Bitcoin 7 and all these other exchanges have been around to the present day. Ubit, I guess, was the Korean exchange that was most recently hacked, or something, maybe something else besides then. I can't thank you enough, Roman, for coming on and chatting with me. Can you, before we wrap up, do you have any final comments or things you want to tell our listeners about HodlHodl? And could you advise them also on where they can follow you and the project as it continues to be built and develop?
Yeah, so I just quickly wanted to mention that a lot of people seem to not always understand how HodlHodl works, or they always ask questions like which payment methods do you support, and we support everything because it's a peer-to-peer exchange and users can add their own payment methods. So if you, as a potential user of HodlHodl, have any questions, don't hesitate to ask us. We have a Telegram group or channel. I think it's called a group on Telegram. You can go there. We're all there. Other users are also there, so we always respond as fast as possible. You can ask us on Twitter. Just don't hesitate to ask, and educate yourself, because I realize even for us, a peer-to-peer exchange is an extremely complicated project. There are so many details that we realize our users don't even think about, and there's no shame in not knowing something, so you can always ask questions. And follow us on Twitter at HodlHodl, or on Telegram. Right now it's HodlHodl Testnet, but we're going to change the name. All the links are in the footer of our website, which is hodlhodl.com. Zach, thanks a lot for having me. I guess it was a great pleasure talking to you.
No, the pleasure's all mine, Roman. Again, I can't thank you enough. This CoinPod has been a production of You, Me, and BTC. Special thanks to my colleagues, Tim Baker and Daniel Brown, and to my guest, Roman Snitko. As always, if you missed a CoinPod or are new to the show, visit thecoinpod.com to catch up on previous interviews, and follow @thecoinpod on Twitter to keep up with each week's new episode. And message me on Twitter after you listen with comments and critiques, and even suggestions for guests you'd like to see on the show. We'll be back next week with another CoinPod, and until then, cheers.